IB Biology Topic 3.2 Chromosomes Point 10. Sex is determined by sex chromosomes, and autosomes are chromosomes that do not determine sex. In this video, we'll be looking at the sex chromosomes, so the X and the Y, as well as their individual characteristics and how they differ from each other, as well as these autosomes, which are also chromosomes, but they do not determine sex. The two human sex chromosomes that we have are the X and the Y. The X is large and has a centromere near the center, and the Y is very small. It has its centromere near the end. When we draw a chromosome, here in this characteristic X shape, we'll see that there are these two branches. These are the chromatids, as well as the centromere in the center. So in this case, when we draw the X chromosome, it will be large, with the centromere in the very center, and the Y chromosome is much smaller, with the centromere near the end. This gives us this X shape for the X chromosome and this Y shape for the Y chromosome. And we say that these sex chromosomes the X and the Y are the sex chromosomes because they determine sex. All of the other chromosomes, so all other chromosomes, are the autosomes. And an autosome is a chromosome that does not determine sex. And we can add that it does not determine the sex of the fetus, because this is the step of life, or the stage of life when sex is determined. And because they do not play a role in the determination of sex at this stage of being a fetus, they are autosomes. They do not determine sex. Now we'll take a look at the characteristics of the X and Y chromosome. So the X has many essential genes for both genders, while the Y has a few genes. For the X chromosome, all humans must have at least one. And this is not true for the Y chromosome. But for the Y chromosome, we have a few points to look over. The first point is that a small portion of the Y has the same sequence of genes as a small portion of the X. So, small part of X has same sequence as small part of Y. Or rather, I should have put the S opposite, so a small part of the Y has the same sequence as a small part of the X. The genes that are on the Y but are not on the X are not necessary for female development, and that's our second point. So that the rest of the genes on Y are not necessary for female development. These genes that are on the Y that are not necessary for female development are also not on the X chromosome. And so I'll add here, not found on X. And our last point involves the SRY, and the TDF genes. So when these genes are on the Y chromosome, the fetus develops into a male. And specifically, one of the things that happens is that when a fetus has two X chromosomes, it will not have this TDF gene, and because of this, so thus, it will be female. And because the fetus will develop into a female, there will be ovaries instead testes, and there will be an increase in estrogen instead of testosterone. The last thing we're going to be talking about this video is that females have XX, thus they pass one X to the fetus. Males have XY, thus they have a 50% chance of passing an X or a 50% chance of passing a Y. For females, they have a 100% chance of passing an X because regardless of whether they pass this X or this X, the fetus will inherit an X. Whereas for males, there's a 50% chance of passing the X and a 50% chance of passing the Y. This 50% chance of passing an X or a Y is important for this statement. Gender is determined at the moment of fertilization by one chromosome carried in the sperm. So when the sperm are formed, there is a 50% chance, so 1/2 chance of X and a 1/2 chance of Y. This means that half of the sperm will be carrying X chromosomes from the father, and the other half will be carrying Y chromosomes from the father. So when the egg, which will have this one X chromosome from the mother, is fertilized by a sperm from the father, if the egg is fertilized by an X sperm, this will be a daughter. And if it's fertilized by a Y sperm, this will be a son.